Welcome, everybody, to the Dynamis podcast. Joining me today is Justin Harris of Tripona Nutrition. Justin and I have had the opportunity to speak in the past, but it's been a few years. We're going to hop right into it. I'm going to give Justin an opportunity just to introduce himself, what your background is, not just in the professional world of the fitness industry, but also, yourself, how you got into working out.
Yeah, I always hate doing these. It feels like bragging
I
or
know.
hard to know what to say. But yeah, so I full background, I guess I started working out as a kid. I was an undersized kid, big nobody, like middle of the road. Working out kind of completely changed my life because it was the first time in my life I realized that I could change things about me that I didn't like. I didn't like being weak, and I think up until that point, I just thought you were who you were, and so that was a really big change for me. So I went full into lifting and working out, full obsession. I went to college. I was a late bloomer. I gained 100 pounds between my junior year and senior year. Puberty hit me like a freight train. Plus, I was working out, and uh, and so I ended up playing football in college with just Division III, and I didn't get any offers. But I was two-time Division III All-American, national sack leader in 2000 or 1999. Street Smith magazine 2000 preseason player of the year for defense. Um, Got to do some cool stuff, but of course, as a 5 foot 10 defensive end, not going anywhere after that. So I transitioned into bodybuilding, and I won the 2004 Capital City Classic, 2004 Mr. Michigan heavyweight and overall in both, and the 2006 Junior USA's. I won the super heavies. Then the 2007 USA's, I was seventh in the super heavies. And that was kind of it for me for bodybuilding, because by then I had been building kind of this business, this coaching business. I still competed one more year in powerlifting. I was the 2007 and 2008 APF state powerlifting champion, 275-pound champion, and best lifter, totaling elite in both meets. And then had a little early midlife crisis, and I went back to school and I got a master's degree in physics. I published 3 papers in experimental atomic physics and electron capture from ionized gases, or ionized gases to atomic particles. And you can see my research on ResearchGate. You go to researchgate.com. You can see my publications, which is no one cares or looks at, but they're there. And then I went back to coaching because there's actually no. Well, at first I didn't really. I mean, I've been out of the industry for years by that point. I wasn't really training or anything, and I don't know if anyone would remember me. So I actually went into engineering, and I worked for Eaton, the company Eaton, heavy duty truck transmissions, and I did really well there because it was like like right up my alley of I didn't have an engineering degree, but physics covers just about everything. And I started as a test engineer, which is building and designing test cells. So you kind of have to understand just how things work, how loads work, how electricity works, and so it fit really well. I started out there. Then I briefly moved to reliability because that's more mathematical. I didn't like it. Went back to and became a senior test engineer. And then I was a lead test and controls engineer, where I was basically computer programming, C++ programming and I wrote all the download code and then actually that's a really interesting story. The whole thing, Eaton had kind of pigeonholed themselves. There's a guy named Jeff who had been writing the code. So transmissions come off the line all over the world. And there's, in 1992, you have 2 truck transmissions, and one of them is manual, one's automated manual. The manual doesn't need a computer program. The automated manual needs the computer program. So someone had to write a code that when it comes off the transmission, it passes this download station and reads an output and says, well, do I download software onto a computer or do I not? Well, now there's 75, 80, 100, 200 different versions of automated manual transmissions all over, for Eaton all over the world. And they still had the same guy writing the same code. And he was writing it in Visual 6, which hadn't been supported since 99 or 2000 and would only run on the Windows XP. And they fired him. Just fired him one day on the spot. No, and so he just fired him without asking for the source code or anything. And they asked me to go and see what I could find out. And I was like, I almost left because I was like, Eaton's done. They can't run a single transmission across a single assembly line in the entire world because we don't have the code. Luckily, I found like an older version of the code, realized what he was doing. So I had to run a virtual machine because you couldn't run it on modern computers. I had to run a virtual machine into an XP using Windows 6, or I mean, virtual, whatever, 6 plus. I had no C++ coding experience either. I mean, I'd written in Python, and I taught a programming language called Famous or Famos, which was like a data analysis software. I taught that for the Eaton Corporation. And where was I at? And so the like figured out basically how all that worked, and then got that back up and running. And then I managed that until basically a new transmission was going to be produced and was going to start production in Brazil. And they needed that entered in the code. This was still all done on a single source code, not separate codes for different manufacturers, different plants, different countries. One file on a software that's not even supported anywhere anymore. And actually, the way I got access to the software, because we didn't even have his credentials, I found an old MIT course that included what's that when you get like the access code, the key that had access key to Visual 6++ that still worked. So the whole time it thought I was an MIT student from 1997 or something. And partly why I ended up leaving engineering is because this was like November of 2019. They were in a panic. They needed this code to work, or this entire whole new production run was going to have to shut down. They weren't going to be able to run this whole new transmission line in Brazil, which would be running this medium duty truck transmission for all of Brazil. And they flew me down there, and of course it was Q4. It's a 16-hour flight, and any flight over 6 hours, you're supposed to fly first class. And they won it because it was end of the year, and they told me I had to fly coach. I didn't. I upgraded but to business class and quit after, because the guy in me that likes to solve like difficult tasks was there. So I went down there, and and it was brutal because like it was a disaster. But we got to work. It was down there for like 10 days. Flew back and told them I was done. And I mean, I don't know what they've done since. I imagine they had to. I would imagine there's no way that's still going that way. They would have had to bring in a team of programmers and rewrite the code. Probably, I mean, rewrite it in something better where you just had modules like in what's the one main it doesn't matter, but yeah. So that's how I got back into coaching, and now I run Troponin Nutrition, which is my main coaching website. Team Troponin, which is an educational website, it's subscription based, and a lot of content, some free content, and then First Attachment Supplements, which is my real baby right now. Trying to build that up, and we're growing very quickly, too quickly, because our biggest issue right now is supply constraints and keeping product in stock, because it's very expensive to run product. It takes a long time to source product. You got in like an 8 to 10 week lead time, and there's only so much you can invest into a production run when you don't know how much you're going to sell. But we've been growing so fast that basically no matter how large we run, we sell out before we can complete the next run, which is good problems to have. But we're kind of cresting that hill now, and things are going well.
I don't know when it was that you were on, when we were on the last table talk with Dave. There was a couple of things that you had said in there that really, really resonated with me. And you're talking about first attachment. I believe it was something along the lines of, for lack of a better expression, like kind of leaving a legacy or like leaving your mark on the industry. And actually, I guess I digress. Before you got to that, remember you talking about, because you've kind of effectively tried to leave the industry a couple times.
Yeah.
Um, and there is this feeling, and I think you see this with, everybody who really makes a contribution to it, is like they get pop, like they catch the bug, right? And you just can
Oh yeah,
never
you
shake
can't.
it, right? You
Yeah,
can't shake it.
yeah, the iron bug.
Um,
Yeah.
I was having a chat today with a guy who he's sort of been helping me out with the tail end of my prep. And yeah, we were talking about like, I remember my first job that I had when I was in university. Um, I ended up quitting because I didn't have enough break time to eat food. And I was like, well,
Oh
this
yeah,
is
yeah,
going to
yeah.
interfere with training. So I did a different job, bring meals to class. I remember it's, I work with clients one on one, and I have for the last decade or so. And people find it so bizarre that when my girlfriend and I travel somewhere, one of the things, like we went to the Dominican Republic a few months ago, and one of the criteria was we needed to have a resort that had a gym that we could train at. We
The
went down to
kitchen.
Vegas,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
like, and it's that's the first thing that gets sorted out, and then everything else falls in line after that. And it's almost impossible to run away from. And I think,
It is. I tried my best.
yeah,
Well, the problem is it's it attracts people who are like very obsessive, and I am. Like when I like my whole physics and mathematics journey was I never did math in high school. I didn't. I didn't go past algebra. I had no math experience, and I read a book called Probability One by like Amir Azel or something, and it was an interesting book. And then I read a book by Lisa Randall, and then a book by Brian Greene, and then a book The Universe on a T-shirt, and like all the equations were just so. This just happens to me. Like things will just catch my eye, and suddenly these equations just seemed like the most intriguing thing. I just wanted to know how they worked, what these symbols meant. It was so unbelievably intriguing to me. And so I just completely fell into full obsession, just like bodybuilding, where all I could think about was, and they still are. And it's silly now because like I was just telling my wife the other day, like there's so many things like residue calculus, which is uh, it's calculus with imaginary numbers or complex analysis, which I'll never talk to a single person about, but it's such a beautiful, amazing subject. How like the imaginary numbers doubly cross the real number line, and like the things that come from that, or why all real physical solutions like outside of the quantum world tend to be second order differential equations, and in some cases you could resolve them with correct answers but additional useless answers with fourth order differential equations, or how the kinematic equations of Newtonian mechanics are really, like if no one remembers this, but if you like where a position, you want to know where something is, remember this from like a physics class in high school, it's x is the position equals x naught, which is where it started, plus vt, the velocity times time, plus 1/2 at squared. And the reason you learn that is because gravity is more or less constant. And so the next order cancels out, because in calculus, when something's constant, there's no derivative of it. The derivative is zero. But that's really a Taylor expansion that goes to infinity, and there are higher order expansions. Not only we only take the two, or everything we see on Earth is the first two orders of an infinite number of orders. And things like that just are just so unbelievably amazing. And like if you lay at night, like after you took an edible or something, and you start thinking about those things, it's just like absolutely mind-boggling that we don't all want to know that, because math seems boring, but anyways, yeah, I try to get out, but partly because of the health, I have 4 kids, but it's hard, and your identity is so closely tied to it, and then it's hard to when everyone knows your kids brag about you as being how my dad can beat up your dad, or like just it's silly things that you like, like if you really were a true man, or like truly sure of yourself, that shouldn't matter, but it does. You want your kids to think things like that about you, so it's impossible to get out. So I got sucked back in. But the problem is like coaching can be incredibly lucrative. I don't think people realize how much it is. Like I charge $400 a month, and you can handle a lot of clients. If you're a good coach and you're very efficient, you can handle several hundred clients a month. That's not one check in a week. That's not that many emails. And then if you develop a team around you, I mean, it can be incredibly lucrative. But the problem is the company dies if this dies. There's all internal IP. And so I really wanted something like, like as you get older, ideally I would really like, like you see someone like an Elon Musk and they're going to leave a mark on the world. I would love to leave like a true mark on the world, but not everyone is there. Like we all play with the deck of cards we were given, and that was something else I learned in physics, is that I'm fairly intelligent and I learn things quickly, and more importantly, I can get like I can work hard. It's like if it work overcomes a lot. If the smart kid's studying 2 hours a day and you're studying 16 hours a day, you're studying more in a single day than they do in a week. And that was always my MO, is just like you just grind. And that's why I love bodybuilding, because that every 2.5 hours you get a chance to improve. It's never ending chances to be better and better and better, which is what pulled me in. But I want there to be a reason that I did all this. I would like to, it'd be way cooler if I, like brought us to Mars or created a new sustainable energy source, but I'm not there. And so the supplement company for me is, I want to create something that is a company that, because that are products that I would use and the products that I recommend to my clients, because I've always not hated the supplement company, but it can be it's a business. Businesses are for profit. That's all they're for. And so like you go to Walmart and you can get C4 pre-workout with like 80 milligrams of caffeine and nothing else in it, and you get a great price on it, but it doesn't do anything. And I really wanted to produce supplements that actually did things. Like our suppressor. And we're going to come out with something called Suppressor Max that I can't really talk about because it includes an ingredient that no one else has ever used. That I'm like, sourcing it right now is difficult, but I want it to happen so bad because it's going to be like a true. I think it'll be the mic drop on my like supplement development, supplement formulation lifetime. Or our field rations. We have a research report on our website, essentially proving by the research data that field rations is a better sports drink than Gatorade. And with a few really, really small adjustments, like reducing the carb amount per serving, basically just diluting it so you could actually chug it like a sports drink, and reducing the amino acids, you would have something that unequivocally is better than Gatorade, at improving endurance, recovery, electrolyte balance. Our QRF, our liver products. I have data after data. I mean, because the products work. We have TUDCA, NAC, and we actually meet label claims. Part of the reason we run out of products is because we produce, and then we do our own quality control, and then we do third-party testing, and then once that's all validated, then we ship to our warehouse. And none of that's, how anything in the world works. It's like if production run finishes on Monday, quality checks aren't done Tuesday morning. Quality checks probably aren't even started Tuesday morning because they got another production run to do. And warehouse staff, it's not their dream job, so they're not working. They're doing enough to not get fired, which is I understand because I was in positions that was that too. So quality controls Thursday, Friday. By the end of the day, Friday probably for sure. But then that means then you can't even start talking to the third party testing company until Monday. That doesn't mean they have product on Monday. That means we say, hey, we passed our quality control. Can we send a sample? We want to verify by lab assay that this meets label claim. Yes, sure. So we send it out Tuesday. They get it Friday. Now we're 2 more weeks. They do. But it's Friday. They don't get it till Monday. Hopefully they run on Monday. They probably don't till Tuesday. They get us the data back on Wednesday. If it's Wednesday after the warehouse staff or the manufacturing company's gone home, then they don't report back until Thursday. Now we're on the third week, you know, and it's so like, but I'm kind of just rambling now. But that was the legacy, was I wanted to, if we succeed and these products are on the shelves, I want to know that anyone that buys them, whether they like them or not, they're buying something that does what it says it intends to do. They're not buying garbage, which is what the supplement industry has been for a long time. And for a period in like the late 90s and early thousands, it was a very, very predatory garbage industry. It's better now, but that's kind of what I want from it.
Well, I think the thing that's really intriguing, I think anybody who really takes training seriously or bodybuilding seriously, there's always this conversation about optimization and stuff like that. And yeah, like if you're not, grabbing the low hanging fruit, then certain things you don't matter as much. But 1% and 0.5% add up over time. And I think people who are really serious care about the quality of their food, their supplementation, things being dosed the right way. And it's like, yeah, it's no substitute for a high quality steak and sweet potato or something like that. But
why there's supplements, and which is why you'll see the supplements we produce are always going to be supplemental to that. We're never going to try to claim, take this, it's better than steroids. Take this, you don't need to eat meat. It's going to be, hey, diet's number one. If you're on point with diet, take this. You don't have to worry about liver function. Take this. Bodybuilders die of kidney failure. That's what we die from. Take our renal reset. Now you don't die of kidney failure. That's the whole goal of the company. And the markets, if I was talking to we're self-funded, luckily, because I'm sure if I talked to an outside investor, they would be like, well, why are you marketing to the top 5% of people who know what they're doing? It's like, it's just, I don't even know the word, this whole thing means too much to me to do that. I can't just put shit in a bottle and hope that I can trick an 18-year-old into spending too much money.
Oh, I get that. Like we actually just launched this Dynamis company officially last Sunday. We got incorporated up here in Canada. We launched our website on this past Sunday.
Awesome.
And yeah, it's cool. There's a whole story there. I guess long and short of it is I've worked one-on-one with clients, 160 hours billed a month since I'm 20 years old. I'm 31, and you kind of talk about moving in and out of the industry. I mean, I left university. So when you're talking about the math, I kind of laugh because I actually originally went into school for engineering physics and had a math background. And
awesome. Yeah.
So I actually feel this. I literally have tabs that will always leave me. I have like tabs open on my internet on my phone, and it's math and science and history, and people are like, why the fuck are you reading this? I'm like, I don't know, like it caught my interest, cool. And then I needed to know. And
I want to understand, like, we live in this world, we're only here for a short period of time, and most of us care, like, I mean, all we care about, and part of it is because we don't make enough money to have anything other than worrying about it, but that's all we worry about, and it's like, why are we here? There's there's a massive universe. Why are things the way they are? And mathematics explains that, and things don't have to be confusing. My kids kind of always like make jokes like, how do you know how? Because if you understand, like, why the sky is blue, because it reflects blue light, and why at dusk why it's red. It's because the light is hitting, because gravitational pull of the earth is kind of bending those light waves a little bit, and then the length of the white waves increases, and a longer white wave is called red shifting, and so it shifts to a redder, like, none of that is a mystery. It's all explainable by mathematics. And I think like the most beautiful thing in the world is to go out, look at the red sky and know why it's that way, or why it looks like the moon is bigger when it's lower on the ground. It's not. It's because it's closer to things that you have a visual representation for, like a tree, which makes the moon appear bigger. The moon's the same size when it's way up. And like things like that just appear like mysteries or optical illusions or things like that most people just go like, I don't know. To me, it's like it's an incredible thing to understand how the world works.
Well, and I think, even if we tie this into coaching, I mean, coaching goes beyond X's and O's. Like I don't want to say anybody can write a diet, but I mean,
Anyone can write a
there's
diet,
anyone can write a diet, right?
whether it
There's
works, but
yeah, but there's always going to be a human being in front of you too. And I think, I think of, so I'll say this, like one of the big reasons why, a few years ago, I wanted to have the opportunity to talk to you and then do this again. I am incredibly intrigued by a guy who, obviously has done the in the trenches stuff and lifted weights and done all that, but is somebody who is intelligent and curious. Like it makes somebody an interesting person. And I think you get drawn to those people, if you're working with human beings, like you want to have this kind of relationship with them as well. And I also think that there is something to be said for the more you practice exploring, finding answers, that translates into your ability to do that with other people as well, right? Like it's a skill.
Oh, absolutely. And I always like that's what on Team Troponin, we haven't done an episode in a while, but that's what like first principles approach. Like if you understand how things work, you can figure out why. You can start from the ground up and get to the conclusion for just about anything, And so when people, it's like, why did this work? Well, like if it's like some with sodium, or when I did this with my water, why did it work? You don't have to guess, like if you understand how things work, and it's like that whole process is, I don't know, like incredibly enjoyable to me.
Well, and I reference the first principles quote quite a bit because I think it's completely true. Like I've handled, this is my first bodybuilding show, and I've handled 98% of my prep. Sort of had a friend of mine help sort of towards the tail end, and a lot of my decision making ends up just being, okay, like what do I actually understand about physiology? What do I actually understand about biochemistry? Like the last couple of weeks I've had some weird just weight stuff, but I'm doing X, Y, and Z. I am absolutely in a calorie deficit. Like fat loss isn't the issue. So I had a like higher food day on this past Sunday. Weight drop. Why? Because you're in it, you've been dieting for 18 weeks and cortisol's through the roof and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then you wash that away with some higher carbs. Like,
yeah, and insulin's a mild diuretic,
yeah.
and it increases your metabolism, and it increases sodium reabsorption. So you're a little dehydrated, your sodium reabsorption is a little higher, metabolism's higher. So then you go into the next day and it's a lower carb day. So what happens? Well, you're already dehydrated a little bit from the mild diuresis from the insulin. So you're holding water a little bit more. Your sodium reabsorption is higher. Your blood sodium level is higher because of the sodium retention of the insulin. And on a lower carb day, what do you tend to do to your food? Salt it more heavily because it's not sweet,
Yeah.
So boom, holding water. Why did my weight go up on a low day after a high day? It's like, it's not magic. You can work out exactly why, then, and like knowing those things will blow clients' minds, like I talk about this on the Mark Bell podcast. Like I'll freak clients out all the time when I tell them they're going to get sick, and it's not magic. A client does a check-in and they look watery as hell and they've lost weight. What could cause that? Like there's not very many things that could cause that. One thing that would cause that is they're sick, their body's fighting something, they're depleting glycogen in fighting the whatever the illness is, and they're holding water in response to the illness. So if they're watery and their weight has not gone up but has gone down, you can expect that at any moment now that throat's going to get pretty itchy or that stomach's going to hurt. And then when they like you say that and they text you the next day and they go, coach, I'm sicker than hell, I got strep throat, how did you know? And it's like, I didn't know, but I knew that you were watery in the photos and your weight was down. I don't know how many other things can cause that.
So I actually want to get a little bit more into the bodybuilding stuff, if that's cool with you.
Yeah.
Um, so just because we're kind of talking about, you know, I guess in this case, prep. If you're working with a client, and let's say at the beginning of prep, what things do you want to have in place as like an initial setup to ensure that they're in a good place to start contest prep?
If you can do it, control everything, no more than 12% body fat by calipers. I hate using body fat percentage because like there's that thing on the internet now where like Andreas Munster, people like he was 26% body fat. You know, like people love to just give out ridiculous numbers. And we don't know. When outside of an autopsy, you could never know. But when I learned about body fat percentages, it was basically like 11-point skin fold calipers. And those to my so that's where my brain's still at. Hydrostatic weighing's more accurate. In-body scans, I think, are useless if you have a lot of muscle. I think it could be terrible. But
Yeah.
there's other methods, and who knows what they are. But 12% body fat, meaning you can still see your abs. Maybe you don't have like a full deep six pack, but or actually a better way to describe it is you're lean enough that you can tell when you're watery and when you're not. You know, in prep, you know when you're holding a little bit of water. If you get so fat in the off season that you can't tell whether you're watery or not one day, there's too much fat because that little extra film of water isn't noticeable. So if start with that, start with as high of a metabolism as possible. Start with we want your food intake to be as high as possible, so your metabolism is as high as possible, and basically glycogen loaded as much as possible. Where we enter that whatever our start date is, 16 weeks out or whatever, as close to completely glycogen saturated as possible, with a very high metabolism, such a high food intake that you're sick of eating, and you're lean enough that you can still tell when you're watery or not watery. You know, like you have a faint outline of abs. You start with that, and prep's gravy. I mean, no prep's easy, but there's no it's we don't have to pull any rabbits out of a hat. You know, it's a very simple process at that point. We got tons of room to work with metabolism. We don't have a ton of body fat to drop, and we've got a lot of room because your glycogen stores are full where we can push before we have to worry about you getting so depleted that muscle loss is a problem.
And I know you've often used kind of a carb cycling approach, which
Mm-hmm.
I think is weirdly like it's almost become this meme, so to speak. I mean, if you look at a lot of well set up diets, they use something similar to that anyway. Like I
Yeah,
know, like John Jewett has his low days on a rest day.
yeah.
Lots
I
of
mean,
people do
everyone. Yeah,
that.
people eat a little bit less on days they don't train.
Yeah,
It's not like it's everyone does
yeah.
the same thing. It's not similar things. Yeah.
Um, so if you've got a client, let's say, who is actually trying to make a particular weight category. So let's say, you know, a 212 guy, a classic guy, something like that. How might you approach the tail end of their prep if they have to make weight versus, you know, an open guy, they just have to achieve a
Yeah,
look,
yeah, yeah.
right?
Yeah. I'm glad you said tail end because you don't do anything different until the tail end because you make weight with water. You know, you don't make weight by being leaner. That doesn't matter. You have to be you have to be shredded no matter what. And once you get shredded, now we find a way to make weight. So it's not like people always I see people say, you know, like, well, I got to make weight, so I don't want to have any high days. It's like that's not that's not doing anything. You got to be shredded either way.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, like glycogen isn't that much weight. You can do the math, and then I have like an ebook that I want to put out at some point. But you know, you say like just for round numbers, say someone can store 1,000 grams of glycogen. I think the average man holds like 500. The average large male like 800. So maybe a bodybuilder with all that muscle 1,000, but 1,000 grams of glycogen. If that's 1,000 grams of, and I should, you know, I never really checked this. Is that 1,000 grams of glucose as glycogen or 1,000 grams of actual glycogen? But anyways, glycogen is 4 to 4.5 times as much water as it is glucose. So if you have 1,000 grams of glucose stored, then that means you have about 6,000 grams of total weight stored. You know, and so that's, you know, I don't like I use good old, you know, we fought the British
Yeah.
so that we could use their units. But you know, that's what will be 5,000 grams would be, you know, 5 kilograms would be 11. So like, you know, 12 pounds. So you got 12 pounds right there just by getting completely glycogen depleted, but right before weigh-ins. Usually that's enough, you know, but you have water also. 70% of your body's water. So after that, you just have a ton of ability to lose water. You just don't want to have to lose any more water than you have to, because that's what makes it hard to peak. Because the way to lose water is to lose sodium. The sodium content of your blood has to stay at 0.9%. If you dip that down to 0.8%, the way the body can bring it up to 0.9% is to pull some water out of the blood. And, and that's what you do, So but the problem is when you get depleted in water, now you can't can't load glycogen, because you need water and you need sodium to store glycogen. And so you really don't want to make weight with water cut as much as possible, because that makes the carbing up very, very difficult, because you have to be super precise. You have to have only as much water as will be needed to combine with the glucose to form glycogen, which is nearly impossible to know, because you also have sodium in the mix, because sodium is like the carrier to bring glucose and water to the muscle. And you need to do all that while trying to keep blood sodium at 0.9%, because what happens if it gets to 0.10%, or it's really 0.1%, but if people are so bad with decimals, I got like mocked on Mark Bell's podcast for saying 0.10%, but I said the Wendy's at one point came out with the third pounder in response to the quarter pounder, and they had to drop it because Americans thought a third pound was smaller than a quarter pound, because 3 is small. So so I say 0.10. But if you're doing all that trying to fill back out and your blood sodium goes too high, what happens? Your body has to hold excess water. Boom! Now you spilled. Now you don't. So that's what I try to do, is I basically try to make weight with glycogen depletion as much as possible, without affecting sodium and without affecting water. Because if we can make weight doing that, then we're gravy. Then we just carb load. It's not, it's still hard to dry out, but we aren't trying to carb load from a dehydrated state, which is nearly impossible, and then get back to a dehydrated state all within like a 24-hour span, which is not going to happen. But that's really all it is. And like I said, if you have now that's a big guy. So you could say like well, super heavyweight, it's not going to be making weight. That's the upper limit. So you say you got like a middleweight, maybe you got half that, maybe not 13 pounds, but you got 6 pounds of glycogen potentially that you can cut just by completely depleting in glycogen without affecting sodium or water before the weigh-ins. You might need a little more than that, and then if you do that, then you're going to have to cut water, which is going to have to reduce sodium, and that's going to make the peaking harder. But you want to do as much as possible glycogen wise before you do anything else.
So let's assume somebody is in that position where, they've made weight, and a lot of them, the weigh-ins are the afternoon before or the evening before. How might you approach trying to carb that person up for the show the next day, but not overdoing it? Like, how would you find that balance?
You can almost run the numbers to say, we think you're 500 grams depleted in glucose to fill out. So we know 4 to 4.5 grams for each. So then 5 times 4 would be 2,000. So we have 2,000 grams of water that can combine with it. We can't just drink 2 kilograms of water. What would that be? I think a gallon of water is 4 kilograms roughly, or 8 liters is about 4 kilograms. We can't just drink that, because you're constantly still losing water. Breathe every breath. I mean, hold your breath in front of a mirror, it fogs up. Moisture is always coming off your body. You're still peeing, so it needs to be above that. But you can at least give yourself a ballpark. We know that if we need 2 kilograms of water, which would be about half a gallon of water, combined with 500 grams of carbohydrates. And these are just, who knows what the numbers would be, but this would just be an example. We're going to add 500 grams of carbohydrates, add 2 kilograms of water, or basically 4 liters of water with it. And then we're going to know that some sodium needs to go with that, because if you get low sodium, what ends up happening is you get, if you're adding carbs and water and you don't add the sodium, your blood sodium concentration drops. So there's no sodium to store glycogen. And then your body panics. It goes into something called redistributive hyponatremia, and that's another way of spilling. That's a different type of spilling. So you need to add some sodium, and you can actually go a little overboard with sodium late in prep, because if your blood sodium is too high and you're at the very end after you stop drinking water, there's not much your body can do, because it's, if your blood sodium goes to 0.10 again, or 0.1, it needs to pull water into the blood. But if you're not drinking water, where's that water coming from? Under the skin. So that can actually help you, so you have some leeway with that. And that's just basically it. So we say, okay, we got to carb up. It looks like, we're going to carb up with 500 grams. We need to restore 500 grams. Your natural metabolism maybe is going to burn 250 grams. So now let's add 750 grams of carbohydrates. 2,000 grams of water is going to go with that 500 grams. We don't know how much is going to go with the other 250, because that's going to be burned off with your metabolism and while you're talking. And if you're a talker, you're going to burn off even more water. But we don't know. So let's say let's just go to a gallon or 8 liters of water. Gives us some leeway, and we're going to reintroduce sodium at a pretty safe level of maybe 4 grams over the course of that process. And then you just get what you get. You never, what matters is that you're shredded, not that you're, and that's the hardest thing, like, for people to understand. Like, everyone cares about the peak and the peak being perfect, but you can go watch Ronnie Coleman, the Unbelievable. He's 5.5 weeks out of the Olympia and he's shredded. That dude could, it's not like he would have walked on stage at the Olympia after that shoulder workout and everyone been like, oh my God, Ronnie's out of shape. No, he probably still would have won. And that was 5.5 weeks out, not worrying about water or sodium. You know what I mean? So as long as you have zero fat on your body, like, just get close, get above 75% correct. Don't try to get to 100%, because if you go to 101%, it's the same as going negative 100%. So
Yeah, the phrase that I've heard a lot, especially at the amateur level, is shows are less about a muscle size contest and way more a conditioning contest.
yeah. Bodybuilding is a body fat contest. How many mass monsters are there? Like 10
Yeah.
on Earth? I mean, seriously, there's no mass monsters at your local show. They're all in the Mr. Olympia, and even half the Mr. Olympia aren't mass monsters. I mean, so shows aren't won by size. Who can win a show by size? Big Ramy? Not anymore, but he used to. Ronnie
Samson, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, there's that's it. There's, like, you can count the number of people on Earth who can win a show by out muscling everyone on one hand, and you're not going to be competing against them because they're all doing the Olympia.
Something I wanted to ask too, just, you've obviously coached for a very long time, and something you hear a lot, I feel like bodybuilding goes through these waves of popularity. It feels like it's really popular right now. Maybe just because of the prominence of social media. With such a high number of bodybuilders, or at least people pursuing bodybuilding, if you were to look at somebody, let's say they're starting as an amateur, they're not like somebody who's never worked out before, but they're like a serious amateur. What couple of things would you look at in them to be like, like, this person's got a chance to go far?
To really go far, the truth is, were you getting accused of being on steroids in middle school before you started work? I mean, that's the truth. Like, you saw what Phil Heath looked like as a basketball player. You saw what, like, what Jay Cutler looked like before he ever touched a weight. You saw what Ronnie Coleman looked like at age 13. Dexter Jackson was an amazing, like, high school running back. Now, Phil Heath, I was at the junior nationals. I had a client, Chris Perticari, who took second to him. Chris Perticari would have won the heavies at like 90% of junior nationals. And Phil Heath walks in, and the dude didn't follow a diet, really. I mean, he, like, tried to eat chicken. He didn't know about anabolics. I mean, he was using them, but he was not using what he was supposed to. He was using, like, your standard starter off-season cycle, right up to the day of the show. Like, that's the unfair truth, is that like Ruly Winkler supposedly was gaining like 3 pounds a day when he first joined the gym. Like, it's a hard truth, because I had decent genetics and I probably could have turned pro if I kept pursuing it, but I had to do everything perfect, and there's guys that don't have to do anything perfect who would beat me 100% of the time. It's and so it's the same as it's like, how would you look at someone and know whether they can play left tackle in the NFL? Are they 6'8", 330? Because if they're not, sorry, how would you know if someone can be an Olympic sprinter? Are they the fastest person anyone has ever seen with zero training? Do they just walk onto a track and set every school record the first day, not knowing what they were doing? How do you know if someone can play in the NBA? Are they just an absolute inhuman freak athlete who's also 6'6"? How do you know if someone can pitch in the NFL? Well, ask them to throw a ball, even if no training and they've never played baseball. Are they throwing 82 miles an hour with a palm ball? Then like, how do you know if someone can be a major league baseball player in general? Like what, hit them some ground balls, because ground balls are hard. Like, I played baseball. Baseball was my first love. Like that transition from looking forward, because you move your head and you have to track this ball that's moving very fast and bouncing and potentially taking bad hops, and you don't get to keep, because if you keep your eyes fixed in one spot, you miss the ball into the glove. If you see the ball into the glove, there's a period of time where you have to transition your eyes. Can you track that ball at 100 miles an hour? Not everyone can. Most people can't. If like you put some people, their swing is just natural. Some people just know how to pivot, quick hands, stiff front foot. Just like it's just completely natural. Like there was a kid in the area who I don't know if he ended up getting drafted, but he was like the talk of the town when he was a freshman. And it was like, like you can't teach that. You can become a good baseball player, and you can become obsessed and become a college baseball player, but you're not going to be a Ken Griffey Jr. unless you're Ken Griffey Jr. And so really that's what you look for. And I can tell you an example, like, because people come up to me all the time and, do you think I have it? And it's hard to say, because I won't tell anyone no, because like you would have told Dusty Hanshaw no, and he didn't get it, and he became a pro,
Yeah.
like, so it's, what's the difference? Are you going to win the Mr. Olympia? But an example was Steve Kuklo. So I met Steve Kuklo. Someone told him that I knew about diets, knew about bodybuilding, in the local area, and to come meet me. And I was just a kid myself, like 22 or 23, I don't remember. And he was like 17 or 18. And we were living in an apartment at the time. We just got married. And he knocks on the door, and the 17-year-old kid comes in at 220 pounds with abs and these calves, that look the exact same as they do now. And he's holding this printout from bodybuilding.com. And I tell the story every time. And this kid walks in looking like he could win the Mr. Michigan. He doesn't work out. He just lists with his hockey team, and he wants to be a bodybuilder. And he's looking at this. He's like, yeah, I printed this out. It talks about like a bodybuilding diet. I guess you're supposed to eat a lot of chicken, and it's like, like I have clients who have devoted a decade of their life to eating. I mean, and they eat perfect year round, prepare all their meals, they're on cycles, and they're not 220 pounds with abs. And this kid was a 17-year-old kid who didn't even work out, like, and that's the hard truth. And people don't want to accept it in bodybuilding, the genetic aspect, because of steroids, which, and
Yeah.
then and the work ethic, because the work ethic is different also, and because there's so many more opportunities to improve with eating 6 times a day, all the training, all the cardio, so you really can get that 0.1% difference, and someone with poor genetics can really move past what their genetics would allow in general because of PEDs and all those things. But it's just like any other sport. You can't just go and decide that you want to play left tackle for the Detroit Lions, because unless you're 6'8", 330, you're not playing left tackle. You can't just decide that you want to pitch in the majors, because these days, if you're not throwing 97 or more, you're not pitching, and you don't just get to practice a lot or take a lot of steroids and suddenly throw 97. It's in the cards or it's not.
I think one of my favorite stories is with Brill Sarachev, who at one point held the world bench press record. And I think the story used,
He is a mountain.
oh yeah. But so the story I heard was he was either 15 or 16 years old, first time walking into the gym, bench press 200 pounds. And within a year and a half, and he's a teenager, a year and a half, he benched 573.
Yeah. Julius Maddox.
Just
I did Julius's diet briefly. I don't know that he followed it much, but I, he's a big
like he's
eater.
not 12%.
But Julius Maddox, he was. This is. I think this must have been during COVID, which is why it didn't happen. He was going to make a run for COVID and have a film crew, and they were going to track it all, and then he was going to go for 800 at Wrigley Field, and then I was hired to do his diet, and then talking to him, he was in jail or like juvenile type thing. He was young, but I think he was over 18, but like for something petty, like a jail thing, and they had a weight room, and he never really went down there, but he would go down there almost every day, and there would there'd be 245s in the bar, and he'd just do a bunch of benches, and he'd mostly do it before his girl would come visit, so his chest would be pumped up a little bit. Well, like it was so easy for him, like he could just do it like it was nothing. And so like they started talking one day, and he said he thought he could do all the weights that were in the room. And so this guy had never worked out other than maybe 10 or 12 times doing bench presses. He's like 18 years old, 19 years old. They found there was like 505 pounds worth of plates in the room. They put all of them on the bar, and he benched it. you know
insane.
like what was your starting bench? Mine was like 95. His was
Yeah.
505.
Yeah, I'm pretty
So
sure the first.
I'm a better bencher than him, because I progressed from 95 to like 500. He progressed from 505 to 800.
Oh yeah, I think the first time I ever benched, I was 14, and I think I got pinned by 65 pounds.
Yeah.
So the fact I ever benched in the 400s, same thing. I'm like, you know what? Maybe I'm better because I progressed,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
such a
Yeah.
percentage more.
Yeah, see that, but that's the thing. Like, there's guys like that. I mean, he's a big dude, but and it's very rare. But that's what you're talking about. There's 8 billion people on the planet, and so if you're the best bencher who's ever lived, you're not just the best bencher of 8 billion people. You're the best bencher of 100 billion people. You're one in 100 billion. Like it's like Einstein or something. Like I loved physics, and part of the reason why I didn't stay in physics, and because I'm not dumb, and like the topics in general came quickly, and I produced research. I produced some theoretical research as an undergrad, and I thought like I'm gonna like I could do something cool here. Like I could affect the world. And two students came in over 2 different years. The first one, this kid named Guyton, who scored like a 990 on the SAT, which, if you don't know what that is, it's the PGME, sorry, the graduate PGRE. Geez, it's been too long. There's a GRE is like the graduate entrance exam, like if you want to go to grad school. But then for like specific programs like math or physics, they have a separate one that's simply physics focused. And scoring like a 700 means like you're going to do like important research in physics. If you score the 900, you have your pick of your schools. 990 is a perfect score. No one gets that. A handful of people ever get that. This kid got that. He went to Western Michigan. He's weird, very interesting. Not a weird kid, like opposite of a weird kid. His wife was like a concert flutist or something. She like brilliant stuff. I don't know what they're doing in Kalamazoo, but he didn't care where he went. His parents were like drug dealers in the Netherlands. He ran away when he was like 16, but he was just an absolute inhuman thinker. And like working with him on problems and seeing not only how much more deeply he thought into the problem than I did, but how quickly it happened, just made me realize like, it's like Julius Maddox benching 500 pounds the first time. Like I can work really hard and I can understand these. I never found a topic where it's like, there's no way I can understand that, I'm not smart enough. But it would be like, this is going to take the entirety of my mental energy for an extended period of time to have any like algebra. I took a class in algebraic topology, which is really interesting because that it kind of like topology is like surfaces, and that's like a really cool way you learn like why algebra is so important, but why algebra is so important in like a curved space time, because like the topology changes and anyways, like I'd sit in those classes and like I'd be exhausted. I could follow it, but if every ounce of my mental energy was on point the entire lecture, to follow each step in each process. Where a guy like him would like, you'd give him, you'd do the first two steps and he's already worked out the rest by like just by natural intuition. And I was like, it made me realize like, I remember there was one problem in actually in residue calculus, and it was a problem where we were trying to find the residue to find a solution with imaginary numbers, and in the residue that because the residue is where you get like a 0 point in this radius, and the equation was like a standard 1/r, but then the 1/r minus, it was the sum of another formula, which so now you have the like calculus with summations where summations are discrete, and like I'm just sitting there, it was like interesting. I'm like, what could you possibly do? You could sum out most infinite ordered things quickly die off like the kinematic equations, so maybe I can just expand that and assume that the first 2 or 3 orders are enough to give accuracy to 1,000 decimal places, which is often the case, and then I integrate each of those separately. And then he looked at it and like, I don't remember what the answer was, but it was just, he just knew, he's like, well, and it's, you realize like some people are playing with, there was another girl, Katrina, who was the same way. She came on later, but I don't even remember how I got on that topic. But that's what bodybuilding is no different. You can really, really love it. There's going to be a guy like Dexter Jackson that comes in, works out 3 days a week and wins the Arnold Classic. It's just the way it is.
There was a couple of things I did want to talk to you or ask you about before we wrap things up, just because I think something I've heard you speak about before, and then also where there's maybe a little bit of different opinions on this. So one of the big things is, so coming out of either a really deep diet or a show prep or something like that, this idea of like rebounding out of it, and not rebound with getting really sloppy fat, but rebounding and actually having like an increased rate of gains coming out of it. Some people say no, because the stress is really, really high. Some people, I know your client there, your buddy Paul, that's like, it's the craziest thing I've seen. He put on what, like 57 pounds of stage weight in 10
Yeah.
months.
Ben Pollock gained 81 pounds in 10 weeks.
Yeah.
David Lamartine has had 3 consecutive near 40-pound rebounds. He went from competing in like 170 to he's 300 pounds right now with abs. Yeah, I mean, time after time, it blows my mind that anyone would argue like, yeah, like stress is high, but stress doesn't like, it's not like, well, there's a little bit of stress, it's impossible for me to grow. There's a little bit of stress with absolute insane appetite, absolute insane gastric emptying rates, absolute insane nutrient absorption rates, absolute insane glycogen saturation response, absolutely insane sodium retention response, absolutely insane water retention response. I mean, it's like, yeah, one little negative with all these absolutely insane positives.
So how might you then structure a rebound coming out of a show prep? So kind of the initial rebound, and then maybe what that looks like going into the off season.
Yeah, I give this away every time. I probably shouldn't, because this is really my main thing, is like putting size on people, and so I hope I don't lose clan, whatever.
It probably draws people to you,
Yeah,
honestly.
yeah. It's real simple. So the night of the show and the day after the show, eat, get it out of your system. You have to. You can be like, no, I'm going to stay lean. I want. No, you're a human. Your hunger hormones are effed up. Your brain is effed up. Those floodgates are going to open at some point. So let's open them right away. They're still going to be open, but let's get them dampened a little bit. So the first 36 hours, pig out. Then you're going to run anywhere, depending on your size, from like 3 to as much as 7 high carb days in a row, which would be high carb days from the way I do a diet, which is very, very high carbs. And each of those days will end the night with a cheat meal, also for getting it out of your system. So you can stay on diet all day, and because the food volume is so high, and 2, because when I get to meal 6 or 5 or whatever, it's on. I can eat what I want, and then we start an off-season diet from there. And we basically, it's 4 to 6 weeks, and you only need to run about 60% of your off-season doses. Most of the growth is probably sarcoplasmic growth, which is fine because sarcoplasmic growth is probably what the main differentiator between the way powerlifters look and the way bodybuilders look. So it's not like that's a bad thing. And what I do is the first 5 days after the show, you stay on all your fat burners, and that kind of mitigates a little bit of that massive bloating. The fat burners aren't enough to do everything, but they dampen the hunger a little bit and they increase your metabolism a bit. The next 5 days, we drop the fat burners in half. And then the next 5 days, we drop them to about a quarter, or, I mean, it doesn't always work out, and basically use sparingly. And then by day 15 or 2 weeks after the contest, roughly, then you're all fat burners. And by that point, we should have tamed your appetite roughly. I mean, your appetite's going to be sky high, but tamed enough that you can actually follow a bodybuilding diet. And if you do it correctly, you should be, by 4 weeks post show, you should be at least as big and probably bigger than you were at the peak off-season size last off-season, and leaner. And I do it time after time after time after time again. I got a guy right now, Cole Albertson, who's I think up almost 50 pounds and still has striated glutes.
And how would you use say like insulin and GH coming like out of the show and then into that rebound?
I don't really do anything special with it, honestly. We'll use insulin on the high days just as a standard, because that's what I do 3 times a day, fast acting insulin, and I have a really specific protocol, and it's a whole long reason for doing that, but I can explain why using it that way gives you more hours per week with insulin above at super physiological levels than if you do it 5 days a week, with every workout. But because it's only 3 days a week, there's probably a lower impact on your insulin sensitivity, despite having more total hours of super physiological insulin levels. And the way I use insulin is totally different also. I don't say take 10 IUs of insulin and eat enough carbs to not die. I say, this is your diet. Build up the insulin dose so you don't go hypo on this diet, because you don't get to change the diet. What we want to do is maximize the diet. We don't want to just say take insulin, because that's why people get fat. They take 10 IUs of insulin and they eat 200 grams of carbs. Oh my God, I got fat. Well, you didn't. Could you eat 200 grams without the insulin? No. You can't eat 13,000 grams of carbs a day without it. Why would you be able with it? But if we have this high day and we know that you can eat this high day and keep a proper body composition without insulin, what happens when we add insulin? Insulin then increases some of that glucose, those carbohydrates that might have been stored as fat before, now might be stored as glycogen, better body composition. Some of those proteins before that might have been converted to glucose through gluconeogenesis and even potentially stored as fat, now might be synthesized as new muscle tissue. So your body composition will actually be better with the insulin. Now, it's not like a dramatic thing, because we're talking a gram here, a gram there, but you do a gram here, a gram there, 3 times a week for 10 years, and you're talking a dramatically different look on, if you're say between the carbs and the protein synthesis, it's 25 grams, and that's 3 days a week, and we do that for 10 years, that's 60 pounds. It would have been 60 pounds if it was all muscle protein synthesis. So that's not quite correct, but over 10 years, that's a 60-pound difference. Let's say even a third of that. That's a 20-pound difference. You're carrying 20 pounds more muscle than you would have with the exact same diet. So it does, and that's what the sport is. It's not so that's why like those Paul Borenson cycles don't work. The sport isn't how much muscle can you add in 6 weeks. It's how can you be 90% perfect with everything for 15 years? Because that's where the progress comes, not in being like blasting everything for 6 weeks, because growth is rare. Muscle growth it doesn't happen very often, and it happens in small amounts, and you want to maximize how often those small amounts happen and then let time pass.
And are you a fan of using like a long acting? I know I've seen some people run that as like a basal. No way.
No, not at all. No, and so many people are going to be type 2 diabetics because of it. No, I don't. Mine isn't even whether or not it's better. Mine is this sport already. You're already gonna walk away with multiple long multiple long-term things that need to be corrected. You're going to need to be on TRT. You're going to have terrible cholesterol levels for a period of time. If you carry a lot of muscle mass, your creatinine levels are going to be high, which potentially is going to reduce your glomerular filtration rate. You might have kidney issues. You have really high blood volume. Ejection fraction might be lower in your heart. You're going to walk away with problems already. So I don't like to use thyroid because I don't want you to retire and need to be on TRT, thyroid, diabetic medication. You know, and one, I don't think there's any benefit to it. And I haven't seen anyone grow faster than my clients grow. I haven't.
Yeah.
So if it is better, then it's however they're using it isn't better. But no, I know like Paul, Big Paul is a fan of it, you know, but I'm just not, because it ruining your insulin sensitivity is going, which is what that will do eventually.
Yeah.
Ruins if your insulin sensitivity is as effed up, you're not going to have a good body composition. And so, yes, you might get better growth rates for a period of time, but again, you don't reach your peak in the sport till like age 38 to 42. And if you're a type 2 diabetic by 33, don't expect to be 40 years old looking amazing, because it's not going to happen. What's going to happen at age 40 is you're going to be a diabetic.
Yeah. The last thing I wanted to ask you just before we wrap up, funny, all the food talk's making me hungry as well. I asked this to Chris Tuttle the other day, and I thought it led to an interesting, just some insight into, I guess, his thought process. Like him, actually, I mean, you've been in the industry even longer than he has. What would you say has been the most significant change within the fitness industry? And then moving forward, what is something that you wish would change?
I hate to be like the old guy as far as people don't work these days, you know, but that really has been. But bodybuilding was such a more niche sport back then. The people who did it were willing to do 2 hours of cardio, you know, but that's how like the complaints I get on prep, everyone complains. It used to be like, you used to diet for 12 weeks, and on day one you did 2 hours of cardio, and you did 2 hours, and you just found a way to make it happen. And that's not, you know, like, I think we've learned that that's not automatically the best approach, but the guys in the 90s look pretty damn good, you know. But yeah, it's and everyone's looking for like like ways to cheat the diet, you know, like not like change these foods, or these technically hit my macros, or, you know, like the Rice Krispies for carbs around training, or it's like that. It's that but for the most part, I don't really think it's changed that much, you know. It's like everyone goes through a pattern. You start out working out, and you train really, really hard, and you love training, and nothing happens, you know, because you're not eating right. So then you learn from a couple guys in the gym that they're taking gear. So you take steroids, and you don't look any better. So then you go online and you say, the pros are all taking 100 grams a day. That's why they look good, you know, because you take gear and you don't look good, you know. And so you take more gear, and you still don't look good. And then you realize, well, it's because I'm not taking GH. So you take GH and you don't look good yet. And so then you say, well, it's because I'm not taking enough. The pros all take 15 IUs a day. So you take more and more GH, and you still don't look good. And so you go, well, you know, it's the insulin. Obviously, you know, the pros are taking, so you add in the insulin, and you still don't look like a pro, you know. You're slowly getting better, you know. And then at some point you meet a bodybuilder, a pro bodybuilder, a top bodybuilder, and every time you're talking to him, he's eating chicken and rice out of a Tupperware container, and you probably still don't believe it, but enough of those times happen that you realize that, okay, everyone at the gym is training hard, probably, or hard enough, or decent, doing the same exercises at the very least. You know, there's only so many exercises. You have what equipment is at the gym. You go to the gym, and everyone has to use those same machines. So that's not the difference maker to a complete extent. You know, everyone's on gear because 3 million Americans use gear. There's only like 75 million Americans between the age of 18, 75 million males in America between the age of 18 and 55. So 1 in 25 Americans are on gear. Probably less than 1 in 25 people regularly go to the gym. So most everyone at the gym is cycling. So that's not the difference maker. So there's one more equation to become a bodybuilder, and that's the nutrition. And if you can get to that point, then you learn that yes, it's nutrition, and then it's nutrition. And that's not saying training doesn't matter, because you have to train hard, but the hardest trainer is not the biggest guy. You've seen pros train. You got to train good enough, uh, and it's not, gear doesn't count. You have to take gear, but it's not who takes the most gear. And there's a pretty definite ceiling that most people, I almost encourage them to find it, because you'll learn that there's a point where you're taking so much that growth slows down, because you have test flu, you can't eat, you have no appetite, you can't keep your eyes open because you're so lethargic, and so if you can't eat, you have the flu and you can't train, you're not going to grow. And so eventually you learn that it's really this pretty simple combination of basic compounds that's been around forever: testosterone, growth hormone, insulin in the right amounts, a good training program, but one that you enjoy. It doesn't have to be anything special. And then diet, all diet.
Yeah, it's funny you say that too. Like the thing I think that had made the biggest difference, because I powerlifted before and I've gotten into the bodybuilding thing the last couple of years. And yeah, like if you like training, you always train hard. But powerlifters, I remember my first coach said this line, that powerlifting was for people that like to lift weights, but also eat pizza and drink beer. Um, and really the biggest thing that changed, yeah, training changed a little bit, but food changed significantly, and I'm bigger and leaner than I ever was as a powerlifter. And it's just like it's the like the meal I'm having after this is chicken breast, spinach, and potatoes. And the meal after that's going to be very similar.
I got 96 4-ground beef and rice waiting for me. I'm smelling
Yeah,
it.
exactly.
It's hurting. But yeah, like, and I say, and people won't believe it, and that's fine. And all I'm trying to do to the young kids is, you don't have to believe me, like, and you won't, but that is the truth, and if you listen, you'll find the truth sooner and have a better career. But if you don't, and you make it through, all you did was waste this time until you realized it. But if you get a bunch of novice gym bros, perma bulkers in a group, all they do is talk about gear. If you get a bunch of pros in a group, all they do is talk about food, especially if they're in prep. I mean, that's all they talk about. What are you eating? And that's all they worry about. Try to schedule a pro bodybuilder for a photo shoot, and all their questions are based around: when can they eat? Will food be there? Do I need to bring food? Will there be food breaks? You ask, like, if you happen to ask like a novel gym bro about a photo shoot, he's not gonna ask a single word about food. He's gonna go talk to his buddies. He's gonna be, what should I front load? Should I take DHB before this shoot?
Yeah. Anyway, on that note, I will let you eat your ground beef and I'll eat my chicken.
All right.
So just as we wrap up, I know you're wearing the first attachment stuff, but can you let people know if they want to either reach out to you for coaching? I know you're really busy, or they want to find any of your supplements. Where can they find you?
I have openings, and you have like kind of loose seat limits, but the right client I'll always take on, no matter how busy. If you get like a cool kid who's motivated, and or a interesting case, like a guy with GI issues who used to be, if don't ever hesitate to at least contact me or email me about coaching. If I might be full, but if it's an interesting case, I'll always take on one extra person. But troponanutrition.com. I think if you just Google search Justin Harris bodybuilding, everything will come up. But my Instagram is at @Tropona_nutrition, but Tropona Nutrition, and you can find my supplements there too. You can find Team Troponin there also, all through the links. But Team Troponanutrition.com is my coaching. First Attachment, and it's one ST detachment. If you Google First FIRST, it'll come up also. First Attachment Supplements, and you can find us at First Attachment on Instagram, and then teamtroponin.com. And again, if you just search Justin Harris bodybuilding, all of that should pop up.
Awesome. Well, we'll wrap up there. Thank you a lot for doing this. I don't know if I had mentioned this to you before, but when we first did these sort of Instagram live videos a few years back, I will say having some of these conversations around food and bodybuilding was one of the pushes I think that got me into wanting to compete in bodybuilding instead of powerlifting. And I think you were the first person at that time who is sort of a, like big name in the fitness industry who had agreed to come on and do the Instagram live videos. And for myself, at least, it kind of built this confidence of being like, hey, like maybe this podcasting thing is something I'm going to pursue at some point. So for whatever it's worth, even back then, a few years ago, you definitely played a hand in this now officially launching. So
I appreciate that. And I don't get that because like time is limited, obviously. I understand that. But if you love the sport and I love the sport, I'll go on. But we have some podcasts now and we're dealing with like people that might like have a criteria list for being on. It's like, man, like I just want to talk. I love what you're doing. I'm a big fan and you fit the criteria of this podcast, like if you don't want to, you don't want to, but like I hate that. Maybe, I mean, that's why I probably don't have a million followers, but I just don't understand that. Like to me, I love the sport. That's more important to me than like perfectly cultivating like where my stuff is seen so that I don't care about that shit. If someone wants to talk bodybuilding, I'm there.
Amazing. Well, I'll let you go and we'll both go eat. Thanks again, Justin. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. For sure.
Cheers.
Thanks.